Suddenly, I was pulled out of this cosmic botanical paradise and instead flipped into a world not unlike the repetitive flipbook-like quality of a salvia experience. I kept seeing myself and others caught in a repeating trap of trying to accomplish something, trying to achieve some kind of resolution that can never be achieved. Hello, welcome to
Bad Trip Reports.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Amanda.
And we're the band Corbu. Today we're going to read you a trip called
Nothing Ever Stops.
And it comes from the world of ayahuasca. This trip is sourced from arrowwood.org, and the link to the original trip report is in the description below. So the trip begins. I had done what I told myself was ayahuasca twice before, using Syrian rue and mimosa hostilis. This would be the first time using the traditional recipe. A note on the timing of this journey. 4 days earlier, I'd lost my brother-in-law, who had been suffering from liver disease for almost a year while awaiting a transplant. I was with him when he passed, and this was weighing on me heavily going into the journey. On one hand, I could be setting myself up for a hellish experience, but on the other hand, it could prove to be perfect timing to release the trauma of that event. As usual, it proved to be a both-and situation. I prepared my room by lighting candles, propping up pillows on the bed, having a lined garbage can handy for the purge. I also packed a bowl of cannabis and kept a candle burning in the nearby bathroom. Before drinking, I performed a Kundalini yoga set for the coordination of mind, body, and soul. I then again smudged the room with white sage, all the while chanting the Shabbat mantra for protection. I sat cross-legged on the bed and whispered my intention one last time into the glass of ayahuasca. In retrospect, 325 milliliters was a lot, and I probably should have reduced it further. It took me about 20 minutes to finish drinking it down in small gulps. The taste was intensely bitter, in a rank coffee kind of way. Upon finishing the glass, I set it down and began meditating on my breath. I could feel the liquid sloshing anxiously around in my gut, but continued to focus on the breath, knowing that I needed to keep it down for at least 20 minutes if I wanted to have the full effect. A playlist of soft music filled the room. I can't delineate when my situation transitioned from waiting to arrival. Suddenly, thoughts were disjointed. I was waiting for something to happen. What was happening next or before? What song was playing? Who's asking? My vision was suddenly blurry, and when I turned my head, it took some time for my eyes to catch up with the rest of my head. Confusion, and then nausea. I never made the decision to vomit, I was just vomiting. I pulled the garbage pail between my legs and let it go, a deep, ragged retching that, despite its intensity, only managed to bring up a small amount of liquid. Suddenly my bowels clenched, and I watched myself fly from the bed to the bathroom, garbage pail still in hand. Now I was projectile releasing from both ends simultaneously. My head filled with the noise it made. This terrible sound was suddenly familiar. I had heard it just 4 days earlier, made by my brother-in-law as he lay dying. An unspeakable realization dawned on me. I was not only myself here and now in the bathroom being sick, I was simultaneously my brother-in-law dying in the hospital. What had always seemed to be two events separated in time and space and within two different people now revealed itself to be one singular event happening to the same consciousness. There's no way to convey this kind of dread, this fear. I continued purging from both ends, and in between each heave, I would ask out loud if I was really my brother-in-law and if this were really happening. Then I was shown flashbacks of every terrible thing I'd ever done, everyone I'd ever wronged, every lie I'd ever told since I was a child, all this guilt just being churned up for me to witness before being puked out. And when it was done with me, I purged for humanity's atrocities, for murders, rapes, injustices, you name it. It was all given to me to be vomited out and released. I believed it would never end. A voice. I'm calling it a voice, but I know it wasn't a voice. But what I can only describe as a telepathic signal, impossible to adequately articulate, although it was certainly female. It calmly suggested that I should gather myself and get back on the bed, so somehow I did. I crawled back to the bed and for a moment considered smoking some cannabis to take the edge off. The voice returned, and her message was more or less, "No, you asked for me and you got me. I'm not sharing you with anyone else." The voice struck me as that of a jealous lover. I laid down and closed my eyes. A million lifetimes and the talents of every great artist who ever lived would not be enough to even approximate the utterly impossible beauty that surrounded and enveloped me. Blues, pinks, greens, yellows, snaking vines and embracing tentacles of galactic vegetation. Pulsing mounds of shimmering alien flesh, dripping with thick, wet jungle sex and death and birth and every stage of life and being in between. A vaginal opening in the center of my vision, pouring forth a light that was the source of all creation, and from it poured a rainbow of primordial language and symbols, the very foundation of universal mathematics, the archetypes of cosmic structuring. My soul shook with an orgasmic sensation as I was pulled apart and painted upon the entirety of existence in the same pattern that I saw. All these silly words I have to use, what's the point? It's indescribable in the end. I've smoked DMT before, and it feels like a child's kaleidoscope compared to this. Behind this incredible experience was the hum, the ever-present buzz behind all levels of dimensionality, and also her, the vine, with me, massaging towards and through me with her tendrils, working her love deep into my body and my being. I can't recall when or why it took a hard turn, but it did. Suddenly, I was pulled out of this cosmic botanical paradise and instead flipped into a world not unlike the repetitive flipbook-like quality of a salvia experience. I kept seeing myself and others caught in a repeating trap of trying to accomplish something, trying to achieve some kind of resolution that can never be achieved. The burden, the incredible weight we carry around in this dimension. Nothing can ever be finished. There is no end. We slouch, groaning towards some make-believe ever after that is only a lie invented by a mind that's lost its way. We're trapped. Nothing stops. Nothing concludes. We can't let go. We just carry the weight from one repeating moment to the next. Just as I could not adequately describe the beauty of the previous stage, similarly I can't convey the sheer terror that now filled my being. I felt as though the entirety of my existence was the front end of a giant, roaring wave that would never crash to the shore, but would just forever fall and roar and ache with the desire of a relief that will never arrive. I begged for death out loud, for at least that would be an ending. Then the vision pulled back, and I saw that it was only myself. I was only myself at this particular moment, but in reality, I was all selves that have ever existed or would ever exist. That, the notion of selves in and of itself, is the trickiest of illusions. Each individual life is a split-second costume thrown upon universal consciousness by a strange phenomenon called mind. Only down here does it feel solid, real, and linear. I was pulled out of the illusion into a violent awakening of realization, pulled up furthermore then into a still, silent space outside of all phenomenon, the ever-present stillness. This was not relief, for this was not anything, and yet it was simultaneously all things. There was no me to experience this, however. It was like the doll made of salt who is dropped into the ocean. When I returned to my body, it shook as though having a seizure. Incredible electric vibrations coursed through my limbs and out of my hands and feet. My head was turned and my eyes laid upon a photograph illuminated by a candle. It was 3 of my closest friends toasting a cup of wine in Ithaca, New York. Their arms snaked like the vine itself, and love and friendship poured from their eyes and fell into mine. This was the first sign of a return, that I was coming back. I wept with relief. I wept with joy for my children, my wife, and for my brother-in-law. Over the course of the next hour, I slowly pulled myself back together, and from the center of my chest began the expansion of a now incomprehensible serenity, an understanding that when it all falls away, only love remains. It is, in a sense, the only thing that is truly real. This is the most powerful medicine I've ever taken. 3 days later, I can still feel it in me, snaking through my consciousness, delivering insights, questions, and ideas. It's asking me for a real commitment to ongoing work with her. I feel no real choice but to oblige, although I believe the course now is to explore smaller doses and maybe even some vine-only brews. This experience was less a first step and more of a complete plunge. I know I can integrate this, but I don't believe another balls to the wall trip is what I should be seeking the next time. I've been shown its power, but to truly learn and grow with this teacher, I believe I need to start from the beginning with small, slow steps. Ayahuasca.
Is small, slow steps a thing?
With ayahuasca? I'm not sure. Anyway, we're going to unpack this after a brief message from our sponsor, Corbu, us. So what do you think?
It was very intense. I felt like I was on the trip. And beautiful. It's cool that he has words to describe it because so many people can't. And I know it's not fully accurate. You know, you never really can describe those experiences 100%, but yeah. It is cool to have that glimpse of that reality. And he's also very brave because I feel like doing any drug near a death or an injury or any sort of traumatic experience, whether physically, mentally, you're asking for it, which he was right.
He was, but that's what's cool about it is he literally was asking for it. He went into it, and I feel like that might be the only way it can, maybe not the only way it can work out well, but I don't know. It makes it much more likely to work out well if something hard is happening in your life and you go into the trip specifically to deal with that thing.
Yeah.
You know? I think it's really interesting that of all the ayahuasca experiences that I read when I was preparing for this, this was sort of, I don't know, this was the most powerful for me. And it's the only one that I read where the person was not using a shaman. He wasn't in a group. He wasn't in a ceremony. He did this in his apartment by himself. I've never heard of that.
I don't know if I have either. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know of course it's possible, but it is interesting. I always thought that you would need a shaman to get the full.
I think you would want one.
Yeah, but it's interesting that he got all this just by himself.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting how much just getting into the trip itself about the nothing ever stops thing and the whole Tibetan Book of the Dead, all of that. We recently watched Enter the Void, and I started reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I'm starting to slowly get into the idea of reincarnation a little bit, but it's interesting that was a theme in here, and in a lot of trips that I've read, kind of being shown that death isn't the end. Death isn't even, I don't know. Death isn't even the thing to be afraid of. The thing to be afraid of is never dying, and like eternal life. We think eternal life is like, the best thing that could ever happen. And a lot of these trips are showing, I don't know, making people feel like that would actually be terrible, which is the same as what little I know of ancient Tibetan Buddhism and what's going on there. But anyway,
this was a good one. Good choice.
Yeah. So if you want to hear more bad trip reports from us, we debut them every Wednesday night live on Twitch, where we make music and we hang out with our friends, and you can hang out with us and talk to us and tell us what to do, basically. And also, Amanda just made something to help people have good trips. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I made a playlist called Trip Support on Spotify, even though I hate Spotify.
Fair. What is it? What's the Trip Support playlist?
The Trip Support playlist is a mix of all of my favorite songs that I have found to be a great way to launch a trip. Most of the time, I personally end up like to be in silence, but it's a great lift off as kind of like a guide to having a good trip.
It's helped people, literally helped people before get through their trips.
Yes, I've a lot of the songs on the playlist, maybe not in the particular order, I have used when I have trip sat for my friends, and it goes great. And if they're not feeling it, I just skip it. So if you're not feeling a song, skip it. If you're feeling it, repeat it, and let me know if you use it.
So there's going to be a link to that in the description below. Please submit trips to us at badtripreports.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we really love reading your trips. Arrowwood trips are cool, but having the personal experience and allowing us to share this is great. And on Twitch, we take donations for the Last Prisoners Project. While we air the Bad Trip Reports, it's a nonprofit that is geared towards getting everyone who is in jail for any sort of marijuana charge free, as it should be. So look into them more and donate to them if you can, and watch our trips.
And also, we're trying to do more of this and try to do more stuff that we believe in on YouTube. So like and subscribe, do all the things, help us with the algorithm, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Was that stupid?
That's fine.